Hi, welcome to video 2 in this series. Pour yourself a drink, smoke 'em if you've got 'em. I mentioned in my last video that in the 19th and 20th century labels were generally applied to people according to whether they were upper class, middle class or working class. Interestingly, this implied that only one group of people were supposed to work to earn a living. Somehow the other two groups just always had money. In reality, what they were saying was that the working class were expected to earn their money by working with their hands and get dirty. And this is how the myth arose in modern Britain that doing work makes you dirty and sweaty and is to be avoided. The fact is, in most modern industries, whether it's electronics or medical industries, the workplaces are filtered and so clean you could eat your dinner off the floor. Nevertheless, the myth persists. And that is the reason for the demise of industry in Britain. It started in the 1950s, still going on. So now the chattering classes have invented two other groups of people, left wing and far right. I don't know what's happened to right wing. We don't have left and right wing. We just have left wing and far right. And this is also a misleading invention, and I'm going to go on to explain why I think this is so. Previously, I talked about the two British character traits of not wanting to work with their hands because it got them dirty, and this obsession with joining clubs and where this attitude is leading. So let's wind back the clock a little way to, let's say, before the First World War. We had an empire. The explorers combed the world looking for places to colonize and conquer. Once the explorers and the conquerors had moved on, the bureaucrats moved in. These chinless wonders had only a moderate education, no real life experiences, and yet they went there to tell the locals how to run their lives. And this soaked up a lot of labour until it all came to an end. And it came to an end after the Second World War, when we started to divest ourselves of empire and we were short of money. And what were all these people going to do? Religion was in decline, so there were no jobs in the church. And this is where they came up with their brilliant idea. During World War II, the government had taken over many aspects of people's lives. They told them where to live, where to work. They gave them rules and regulations. And most importantly, they told them what they could say and what they couldn't say. And if it were possible to somehow maintain this status quo, carry it forward and extend it, well, here was a job for all these people who would normally have gone out into empire. They could stay at home and they could control the locals and tell the locals what to do. And that's where we're at 60, 70 years later. And thus was born the shadow class, a group of people that eventually grew into an army. A group of people with few qualifications of any quality, no life experiences, and yet they thought they knew it all. And they began to insinuate themselves into our lives, first of all via central government, and then local government, and then via the BBC to change everyone's opinion of how life should be. The shadow class was composed originally of the remnants of the aristocracy, those that hadn't been eradicated by Lord George. They joined together with the upcoming political classes and used them as convenient tools. Some might say convenient fools. But the political class had families. They started doing what the aristocracy had done. They gave power to their friends, their relatives, their sons, and their daughters and their daughters, and they built dynasties. We had the illusion of democracy because we voted every 4 years, but all the political parties have exactly the same views and the same aims. All they want to do is to stay in power, gather more power, and make money for themselves. Margaret Thatcher's government came along in the 1980s and tried to roll back some of this. She had the idea that people should be free, they should be free to succeed, and they should be free to fail. And I have to say, I was one of those that failed in the Thatcher Revolution after Black Monday. After the Conservatives got rid of their leader, Margaret Thatcher, and installed John Major, and he was quite a good accountant, but he wasn't a leader. He had no particular ideas of where the country should go. He was just managing decline. Tony Blair won the next election with his idea that his slogan, the third way, whatever that was, he never explained what the third way was. The implication was there was a way of not being socialist and not being capitalist and not actually doing anything, but somehow having a good life and making money. All the while, in the 13 years that he was in power, he invented 4,000 new laws, and thus the shadow class prospered. David Cameron, supposedly a Conservative, called himself the heir to Blair. He revoked none of Blair's 4,000 laws. He made no attempt to reignite the flame of Thatcherism. These Conservatives did not believe in the maxim, if you don't succeed the first time, try, and try again. The Conservatives had no plans to nurture enterprise, no plans to promote endeavour, no plans to develop the economy, no plans to enable better jobs, no plans for enterprise to prosper. They continued with Blair's plans to ignore all the problems. Don't build infrastructure. Don't invest in our power grid. And this failure is costing us dearly today because we all have higher energy bills as a result, and industries are failing as a result. Significantly, the only investments that Blair's government made in the 1990s was to build some new schools and new hospitals. But even this was a fiddle. The idea was that the companies who were going to build these hospitals borrowed money on the money markets in order to build their own hospitals, and then charged the government interest in the years to come. 20 years, 30 years later, we're still paying for this, except that they used a faulty kind of concrete, which is now giving way. Schools are finding that their ceilings are giving way. Hospitals have walls that are giving way. And we're still paying for these loans. There's not been a single attempt over all these years to do any work to revamp Britain's business base, because politicians continue to believe that anything to do with industry is dirty. Meanwhile, the British people and the government have become more and more addicted to ever more laws in the name of safety. May I ask you at this point to hit the subscribe button, because that encourages YouTube to more widely promote the channel and we can get the word out to more people. Benjamin Franklin said, "The illusion of security can be a dangerous seduction, often demanding the surrender of freedoms in exchange for the mirage of safety." And that was 300 years ago, before the invention of spin doctors and the BBC. Adolf Hitler famously said, "The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it." And 30 years ago, Tony Blair was talking about joined-up government, aka spying. President Reagan said, "The most frightening words in the English language are, 'We're here from the government and we're here to help you.'" Over the last 80 years, this group of people, the establishment, politicians, the bureaucratic hangers-on, has grown to an ever-increasing rate as they create jobs for their friends, and we, the taxpayers, pay for it all. At the same time as we've been slashing our defence budget to the bone, the shadow class has grown into an army of hundreds of thousands of people. This is one of the reasons we're such a poor country. All these people are drawing salaries, pensions and perks, early retirement, and we're paying for it all. And now even the hangers-on have hangers-on. The shadow class requires an enormous support structure. And what exactly do they do? Do they grow our food? Do they build our power plants? Do they fix broken water mains when they burst? Do they drive buses? Do they build our cars? Do they add one single penny to the wealth of this country? They do not. All they do is they cost us money. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a comedy radio script written for the BBC back in 1978 by an American author living in London. He dealt with the issue. In one episode, the shadow class was tricked into boarding a spacecraft and blasted off into space. It would be bad enough if these people were simply useless parasites. The problem is they've become extremely dangerous. They infect every aspect of British life by inventing pointless and binding and useless laws that slow everything down to a crawl, and this makes everything all the more expensive. In Tony Blair's day, he created so many laws that judges went on record and asked him to stop. It would take forever to enumerate all the ways the shadow class has damaged and continues to damage our country. But here are just two of the most recent examples. A law that withholds the right of individuals to find somewhere to live. A law that withholds the right of an individual to get a job and feed his or her family. We're supposed to have a Human Rights Act. Where's that when you need it? Even the most basic animal is assumed to have a God-given right to look after itself. In fact, we have laws protecting and ensuring animals have this right. Why don't we have laws to prevent interference with the way people choose to live? The members of the shadow class believe that no one should be able to make a move without their express permission. It's worth noting at this point that this country became great not because of Magna Carta, but because of the presumption that we were free people. We could do anything unless there was a law specifically preventing us from doing that, unlike in most other countries around the world that have constitutions where there is a short list, and sometimes at times a very short list, of things that they're allowed to do. We should be free to act for ourselves, to speak for ourselves, and to think for ourselves. And we're going to have to look at ways of clawing back these rights. The shadow class has spent the last 80 years systematically building barriers to our basic freedoms, and that's so they can control us and get paid well for imprisoning us. And they haven't finished yet. So you may wonder why I'm going back to the First World War and the Second World War. Well, I think the phrase is listing the history of the matter, because I'm proving that this hasn't just happened. It's not a mere blip in the history of Britain. It's been planned. It's been going on for a long time. And it's going to go even further unless it's stopped. We're steadily travelling down a road, and we're rapidly approaching a fork in that road. If we take one route, we'll find ourselves in a country at ease with ourselves, with artificial intelligence powering our economy and artificial intelligence robots doing all the dirty, dangerous work. If we take the other route, and this is the route intended by the shadow class, we're going to find ourselves in a very dark place. No freedoms, no original thinking. We will stagnate and we will die out. I'd like as many people as possible to think about this, so if you would, please hit the like button and let's get the word out.